we could start with your full name, please.
Lester O. Lindow, Lindow.
Great. And where and when were you born?
I was born in I'm trying to think the name of the place. Shawano, Wisconsin. I was actually born in what the heck was the name of the town? Belle Plaine, Wisconsin.
Okay. And what is your date of birth?
4/26/22.
So how old does that make you currently?
Now, 96.
And which branch of the armed services did you serve with?
Navy,
Okay.
6.5 years,
Right. And what years did you serve from?
from 40 to 46.
And what ships did you serve on in the Navy?
USS Maryland and the Kwajalein.
Okay.
In the last 3 years, I was on Fleet Air Wing 2 in Kaneohe, Hawaii.
Okay. And what was your rate in the Navy?
Baker first.
Baker first class.
Then I made chief just before I got out.
Okay, great. So I'd like to talk a little bit about your childhood, growing up in Wisconsin. Can you tell me about your parents? Who were they, and what did they do for a living?
Well, they were just my dad was a farmer, and my mother was just a young woman. They separated when I was 7 years old, and then my mother and my uncle and I and my another uncle and aunt, we moved to Oregon when I was 8 years old.
And did you have any siblings?
I had six half brothers. My dad remarried and had 6 more boys
After you?
after me. I'm the oldest. 3 of them is alive, and one died about 2 weeks ago.
Very sorry.
But there's still three besides me.
Do you still keep in contact with them?
Oh, very close. We're as close as any brothers could be.
Did you grow up with them as well?
No, I didn't grow up with them. I was living in Oregon, and they lived in Clintonville, Wisconsin.
So how did you become close?
We just, after I got I don't know how to explain it, I was about 35 years old when I actually met them,
Okay.
and we become very close. They consider me as their father now because I'm the oldest.
Oh, you're a bit older than them?
About 13 years older than the oldest one. He died, and the next one to him, he died about 2 years ago, and another one died about 2 months ago. And then the junior, which was named after my dad, he died about 15 years ago. He died of some kind of infection from an operation, staph infection.
So, growing up in Oregon, what did you do for fun as a child?
Well, I played a lot of ball, liked to ski, and I loved to hunt. My stepdad, who my mother married later on, we hunted and fished all the time. Then I went into service. Then my mother became a commercial salmon fisherman for a lot of years.
So what would you hunt for?
Deer and ducks, geese, anything at 4 legs or flew.
Can you talk a little bit about growing up during the Great Depression?
Oh yeah, that was rough. I still remember that. We could buy a pair of shoes from the Goodwill store for a quarter, which was a lot of money. My mother bought a house when I was about, probably 12 or 13 years old, and payments were $13 a month, and she didn't even know she could make that because she was working for Weyerhaeuser Timber Company. She went to work for them for 18 cents an hour, and when she retired working for them, she was making about $12 or $13 an hour. A little difference.
And did your stepfather, was he working?
Oh yeah, he was a foreman of Weyerhaeuser Timber Company.
Okay.
He had a good job. He died in 1965, I think, 63 or 64, somewhere along there. He died. And then she remarried another man later on, and they become commercial salmon fishermen in Crescent City, California.
And you mentioned you played ball growing up. Is that baseball, football?
Baseball, football, both. I was a pitcher for baseball, for softball, not softball. And I pitched for Weyerhaeuser Timber Company until I went into service.
And did you play sports for your high school at all?
Oh yeah, I played football and football mainly, and then softball.
And what position did you play in football?
Right end, because I was a little guy, but I could run.
Now, did you have any jobs early on?
Jobs? I worked in a butcher shop all the time I was in high school for $6.80 a week, working 3 and 4 hours a day, 14 hours on Saturday. $6.80.
Wow. And did you keep that money for yourself, or did that go towards
I give
the
half
family?
of it to my mother.
Was that your first job?
Yeah, other than deliver newspapers.
Okay. How old were you when you were delivering newspapers?
Oh, about 10.
You remember what you were making back then?
I think I made about $2 a month.
Not much.
Not much.
And which high school did you attend?
KUHS, Klamath Falls Union High School.
And did you graduate?
Yeah. Well, when I went into service, I was 2 months from going to graduation, and when I went back, I took the exam and I passed it and graduated. I became a graduate.
You graduated after the war, or
After the war.
okay. So why did you join the military before graduating high school?
I had a fight with my stepdad, and I said, "The heck with you! I'm going to leave this place," and I joined the Navy. I was 19 then.
And what compelled you to join the Navy?
I don't know. I just did. I had a lot of, my aunt who lived in San Pedro, California, I knew a lot of the guys off of the Maryland rented from her apartment house. And that's how come I went on to Maryland.
Was that sort of by choice?
Yeah.
You got to choose to join
Yeah,
Maryland?
there was about 10 ships we could go on, and one of them was a Maryland, and I knew the man who was a postmaster on the Maryland, and that's how come I went on to Maryland.
So after you enlisted, where did you go for basic training?
San Diego,
And this was in 1940?
41.
Early 41. Okay. And can you describe your training, what you went through and that experience?
Not really. It's just boot camp. There's not much you can tell about that. It's
It's pretty basic.
just basic boot camp.
No memorable experiences there?
Not really. Not really.
And do you remember what month that was in 41?
That was in March and April of 41.
So after boot camp, where were you sent? Directly to the Maryland at that
I
point?
sent to Bremerton, Washington, and that's where the Maryland was in dry dock.
Okay. And can you talk about the next few months? What were you doing?
Well, we just went out to sea and did what anybody else does. When you go to sea, you go to sea.
And this was peacetime.
This was peacetime, and the decks on the Maryland were made out of teak wood. And every morning you get up and holy stone the deck. Yeah, and
What does that mean?
well, it's a small piece of rock with a hole in where a broom handle can fish in, and you holy stone the deck. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 shift. Then you go to the next rod. And of course, when the war started, they took all that teak wood off, because when the bombs hit the teak wood, they were splinters. They did more damage than anything else. So they went to steel decks.
And you were a baker aboard the Maryland, correct?
I become a baker, yeah.
Was there any formal training for that? How did that
No,
come about?
they just start teaching you. You go in a bake shop as an apprentice, and I made first class baker, and then I got transferred off to Maryland.
So what were your duties? What were you in charge of?
Well, when the war started, I was at my battle station. I was a trainer on a 16-inch battery. And then later on, when I went in the bake shop, I become a pointer and a gun captain on a 551, which is a broadside. The last encounter on the Maryland was in Tarawa. Some people call it Tarawa, some people call it Tarawa. So you take your choice.
Got it. So once you guys had left Seattle on the Maryland, you guys were out to sea for how long?
Well, one time we were out to sea for 90 days. That's a long time being around that water. That was during the Battle of Midway. We had went from Fiji Island up to Attu, and they just kept us on the water, kept the Japanese, I guess, wondering where we were at.
But before Pearl Harbor happened, you mentioned that you guys were at sea.
Oh yeah, well, we went out to sea gunnery practice. You'd shoot these big cannons off at what do you call them? Well, they tow signs, and you try to shoot that hole in the sign there. Well, it's just gunnery practice.
Yeah.
I don't know how to explain it.
So you had targets to shoot at. And
Targets, right.
got it. And was there a feeling, an anticipation that war was coming?
Well, I don't know. Really, probably was, but I don't remember it.
You didn't necessarily feel that at all.
No, when the war started, we knew it started, and when the Arizona blew up, we felt that. It was about 100 yards from it, but we felt it on the Maryland.
So when did you guys arrive? When did the Maryland arrive at Pearl Harbor?
Well, we went into Pearl Harbor probably in, I think it was July or August of '41.
So you guys had been there for a few months.
Yeah, we've been there 3 or 4 months.
And can you talk about what were you doing those months and days leading up to December 7th?
Just doing your job, baking cakes and pies, and when you went out to sea, you furnished the destroyers their bread and what have you, because they couldn't cook, they couldn't bake when they were at sea because they bobbled too much.
So you would do all your baking while you guys were in port?
No, we did baking at sea. We did it all the time.
Yeah, okay.
But the destroyers and stuff couldn't, so we hated destroyers because they'd take all our bread,
Oh,
and
you
we'd
had,
have to work for 24 hours straight just to get back supply for our own ship.
you had to bake for them too.
Yeah.
Got it.
Ice cream, we made a lot of ice cream, give them ice cream. Yeah.
Did you have a specialty?
Me?
Yeah. No special, no pies or cakes that you were.
No, we made pies, cake. We made them all,
Yeah.
pies and cakes.
So do you remember? Can you talk about the morning of December 7th, before the attack started? Where were you? What were you doing?
Well, I and friend of mine named Monahan, and a guy named Reed. The three of us were kind of buddies on the Maryland, and we were on our way to Pearl Harbor, or to Waikiki to go surfing. And just as we stepped out of our quarters to get off the ship, we seen this airplane go over with a big red ball on the side of it, and a bugler blew tap. He blew general quarters, and he says, "And this is no shit." And that's when the war started. And the Oklahoma fell up the wrong side of it. If you ever watch the Oklahoma, the bottom of it, guys walking up and down the belly of it. We were trying to I was on a working party then, and trying to get people out of it, and I was one of those people walking up and down the belly of the Oklahoma. She came in the night before. We're just lucky she come in, or I wouldn't be here probably, because the fish that were meant for us went into her.
Is that right?
They found maps of the Maryland with a big red X on it, because we had just got out of Bremerton Navy Yard with all new stuff on it.
So do you remember those first few moments and when you learned that this was for real, this wasn't a drill? What was going through your head?
I don't know. I can't tell you. All I did is got down in my little pit where my battle station was, and then after, when the second attack, there's two guys. We had 3 people killed on the Maryland, and one of them was a pointer on the 1.1, where a bomb hit the Tennessee and killed the officer and the pointer, and that was my relief station, and I had to go and be a pointer on the second. When the second attack come, I was a pointer on a 1.1, which was soon after that they took the 1.1s off because they were so sensitive that when they fired them, if it was raining, they'd go off. When they went out of the barrel, they'd explode. So they took and put 40 millimeters in its place.
Now, as a pointer, you're actually aiming the gun? Is that
Oh,
what
yeah.
that means?
Well, on the trainer we couldn't use the big guns. You can't use them except when you're at sea. But I was a relief pointer on a 1.1. And oh yeah, you can move them anywhere.
And how many men are
On that,
operating that gun?
there's 2 loaders, a pointer, a trainer, and a gun captain. There's 2, 4, 5 people on one gun.
And you guys are aiming and shooting at the planes that are coming in.
Oh yeah.
Can you talk about the sights? How many planes did you experience? I mean,
Oh, I don't know, probably 30 or 40 of them. They were all over the place. I don't know how to explain that. There's so much stuff going on in an action like that, you can't tell what's going on. You just do your job and just keep shooting the guns, and that's it. No.
and the Maryland, you mentioned that the Oklahoma took the brunt of
Yeah,
damage.
she tied up to us when she come in on Friday night. She tied up to us, and so when they torpedoed, they got all of them. We got 1 torpedo in the bow and 1 bomb in the bow. That's all we got. We only lost 3 men, but one of them was the painter in the paint locker, and I'm trying to think. I don't know how to explain it. We just lucky that the Oklahoma come up and tore it up alongside of us, because otherwise we'd have had 5 fish in us, and that'd have probably sunk us.
And you mentioned that you felt the blast of when the Arizona.
Yeah, we felt
got
that.
hit.
We didn't know what it was. It rumbled the ship.
Yeah.
We didn't know what it was. Just a big explosion.
Could you see the explosion?
No, we were down inside of the pit
Okay.
of the big gun, of the 16-inch battery. We didn't see nothing.
So
The
you're
only-
actually enclosed.
Yeah, we were down in the pit. But when the second one come around, I was out in the open. That's different. I didn't like that. I still remember I didn't like it. But it's just you're so busy doing something that you really don't know what's going on.
You're just reacting.
You're just doing what they tell you. You got commanding officers and what have you. Shoot this, do that, and that's it. I don't know what else they probably.
So you're still able to communicate with other crew members, your officers. There's still open
Oh, yeah.
communication. And
Well, yeah, and more or less we're wearing earphones and a microphone to talk to the people.
so you spent the entire first wave, or the entire.
The first wave I spent in the pit
Mhm.
of the 16-inch battery. The second wave I sat on the seat of a pointer of a 1.1. That I didn't like.
And how long did the first wave last for?
Probably an hour and a half.
And then why were you removed from that battle station?
Well, because the guy on the 1.1 got killed. Somebody had to take his place, and it happened to be my relief station.
Did you see that guy that had gotten killed?
Oh, sure. We had an officer named Crow, Ensign Crow. He was a wonderful guy, one of the better officers, I thought, and he got killed. They figure the same piece of shrapnel killed he and his pointer at the same time from a bomb on the Tennessee. Bomb hit number 2 turret on the Tennessee, and the shrapnel came over to the Maryland. But we were lucky. We only lost 2 guys there and 1 guy and one painter. We lost three men's all we lost. We were lucky.
So where was the Tennessee in relation to the Maryland?
Right in back of us.
So how did you get from one to the other? There's a bridge going from one to the other?
Oh no, they're in the water. You're in the water tied up to the dock. We were tied up to Fox 5 and they were tied up to Fox 6. That was a number of they were called Foxes. The one was a Fox 5 and one was a Fox 6.
So was there a lull in between the first wave and second wave?
Yeah, about 45 minutes probably.
Did you guys think it was over at that point?
You don't know. We didn't know. We just doing what they tell us to do. We're kind of like zombies. You do what you're told.
So when you got to your relief battle station on the Tennessee,
I know on the Maryland. I was never on the Tennessee. The bomb hit the bow of the Tennessee. I hit the number 2 turret on the Tennessee, and the shrapnel flew across over to the Maryland.
I understand. Got it. So it was just a different gun position on the Maryland that you
Right.
went to. Got it. My apologies. So when you had gotten there, did you guys have to pull the bodies off of the gun?
Oh yeah, you lay them off to the side and keep working. It's an awful feeling, but it happens.
And how long were you sitting there until that second wave started to come in?
Oh, probably 45 minutes. And
You guys were just looking and watching and
oh yeah, you're looking for more aircraft, and then all of us, here they come. Then we got out of there. We went back to sea and went to Bremerton to be patched up. And then from there they sent us to Fiji Island. Or well, no, they sent us back to Hawaii first, and then after that they sent us out to sea and sent us to Fiji Island, a place called Nandi Bay, Fiji Island. Most beautiful place I ever seen in my life.
Is that right?
It is beautiful. If I ever got a chance to take a long trip to Fiji, I'd like that. That's nice.
I hear it's paradise.
I think it's of all the islands I was in or at, that was the prettiest. We were tied up there for almost 9 months, in and out. We were staying in the Fiji Islands. Yeah.
So let me ask you, after the second wave came through and the attack was over with, can you talk about the aftermath? The rest of that day, what did you spend doing the rest of that day?
Trying to get people out of the water that were drowned. Oil all over the surface, and the people in the water drowned, either from drowning or for explosions or what have you.
So how were you pulling them out of the water?
Well, some of them you just try to get a hold of them. Sometimes we use a boat hook. It's awful. It's hard to explain how bad that is. Nobody likes to pull a dead person out of the water. And we had quite a few of them laying all over the place. There was, I don't know. First time I've ever talked about that. It was bad.
And how long did you guys stay in Pearl Harbor on Hawaii?
We were there for about 3 weeks, 2 weeks or 3 weeks, and then they sent us to Bremerton, Washington to patch up the bow.
So there was no repair work done?
No, we didn't get anything done. The only thing we did there is just stuff to where we could get at the sea. They, I don't know how to, they just go in and plugged it up, mostly with mattresses in the front of the ship. They stuck a lot of mattresses in where the hole was in the bow.
So you guys were still able to sail?
Oh yeah, well, we got out to sea right quick. And the worst storm in Pacific history was on the way back to Bremerton. The waves were falling into the pilot house is 52 feet above the water line, and the waves are falling into it. That's how bad it was. It was rough water. 3 days we couldn't go outside the closing of this. We had to stay in the ship. We couldn't go outside because it was too rough.
Now, did you spend the night on the Maryland the
Oh,
day
yeah.
of the day after the attack?
Oh yeah.
Were you able to get any sleep that night?
Well, I don't remember. Probably did.
I mean, once you had a moment to reflect on what had happened that day.
It's, I don't know how to explain that. It's terrible. It's not very good, but there's so much stuff going on that you really don't know what's happening. And you're young. I don't know how to explain it. Everything is, how would I explain it? I don't know. There's no way to explain it. You've seen all these dead people in the water. It's terrible.
And the next day, Roosevelt had declared war on Japan.
Yeah.
Did you hear his announcement, his speech at all?
Oh yeah, we heard it. They announced it over the loudspeakers on the Maryland. Roosevelt making his big speech.
Did you guys feel that you wanted to get revenge at all?
Oh yeah, everybody. everybody was kind of gung ho. Let's go out and get them. But you do what they tell you. About, I don't know what else to tell you about it. Just terrible.
Did you know any of the sailors on any of the other ships?
Not very many. You don't meet too many people from the other ships. You're kind of held up to the ship you live on. You might meet them ashore or something, but you didn't know who they were. Just, hi, how are you? And have a beer or a Coke or something.
Yeah.
Just friends.
And were you guys forced to stay on board after the attack had happened, or were you able to
Oh no, you had to stay aboard. Where else would you go? That's where you live. That's your home. Yeah. No, you just stay on the ship. That's your domicile, as they call it.
Were you aware what had happened to the Arizona?
Oh yeah, we knew that right away. Within hours, we knew what was happening there. And and the Oklahoma was laying alongside of us. We knew what was going on. The West Virginia was sunk right off side and back of us. Sitting next to the Tennessee was the West Virginia. It sunk straight down.
They got hit pretty bad.
Yeah, it got hit pretty bad. They had a lot of guys that died in it. They couldn't get them out. They couldn't figure out where they were. A lot of people died from suffocation.
If you had to estimate, how many sailors would you say you pulled out of the water?
Oh, I didn't pull but one or two. I helped pull one or two out. That's about all that I actually helped pull them out.
And you mentioned after the war had begun, they changed the deck to steel deck. Did that happen in Seattle?
Yeah, we did that in Bremerton. Took all the teak wood decks off, and in the bake shop we had tile decks in the bake shop. They come in there with big sledgehammers and break that up. So we had the whole ship was changed to steel decks. Because in the bake shop and the galley we had tile, beautiful. But they couldn't have that because if the bombs hit that was glass flying around. That was a bad thing about the early ships. They were all riveted together. If a bomb went off, those rivets come out like a machine gun. They killed more people than the bomb did, the rivets.
So how long did you guys spend in Seattle getting repairs and getting refitted?
We were back in Seattle for about probably month and a half, maybe 2 months. And then we went back we went first to San Francisco. We were tied up in San Francisco for about a month and a half, and then they sent us back to Hawaii. And then from there we went to Fiji. And then we came back from Fiji and went to Tarawa, the Battle of Tarawa. You remember the actor Eddie Albert? You know, he was a quite famous actor during World War II, and he was a captain in the Marine Corps, and he came back aboard from Tarawa, and he stepped in the bake shop and fell right on his butt, but he ate 2 pies. He and Reagan made a famous movie, The Four Horsemen.
Okay.
He was one of them.
So what was your guys' involvement at the Battle of Tarawa?
We were the command ship at Tarawa. And we did a lot of bombardment there. It looked a beautiful island in the morning. In the afternoon, it looked like toothpicks. Blew heck out of it.
How long were you guys bombarding the island for?
Pardon?
How long did the bombardment go on for?
Oh, I would say a good 6 or 8 hours. We were using regular ammunition, and then they switched to armor-piercing ammunition because the Japanese were dug into the coral of the island, and the bombs were just going off. So they went to bombardment or armor-piercing. And it would pierce into the coral and explode. It did more damage. But I seen more people killed there than anywhere. I was a pointer at that time on a 551, and these poor bastards, I felt it was awful to see these Marines going ashore, and probably 1 out of every 3 was killed. I was watching this one boat with a boatload of Marines that were heading to land, and all at once it blew up, and there's guys. It was sickening. All these guys getting killed. It wasn't good.
Now, were they being attacked from
From
planes, from ships?
No, from
shore?
From shore, from the Japanese. That was their. They had these what they call disappearing guns. They'd go up on a track, fire, and then they go back down. And they were raising hell with the Marine Corps. But they finally won. It took them 2 days to get rid of them, but it was awful. Of course, we went to a lot of islands in the Pacific, a lot of different islands. We'd go in for a day and then go out.
And did you guys experience any Japanese fighter planes? Any kamikaze attacks?
No,
Anything
I
of
was
that
off the
nature?
Maryland before that. I was stationed in Honolulu. I got off the When I got off the carrier, I got stationed at Kaneohe Naval Air Station. So the war was over with as far as I was concerned, but it was still going on. The Maryland lost 50 or 60 foot of its bow from a kamikaze. I met some guys on there afterwards that I knew when I was on the Maryland. And they went to Lady Gulf. They caught hell at Lady Gulf.
So how long were you guys at the Battle of Tarawa for? Because you
That
did the
lasted
bombardment and then...
About 3 days.
Okay. And did you spend those 3 days bombing the island, or?
No. We just spent about 4 or 5 hours bombarding the island, and the rest of the time we were just out there cruising back and forth because the Marine Corps was fighting them on they were hand fighting on the island. We bombarded it one day, and the rest of the time it was pretty well hand to hand combat for them. I felt sorry for those guys.
And how close were you guys to the island?
Probably where we were bombarding was probably maybe 4 miles, maybe 5 miles.
And did you get homesick at all?
Who doesn't? That's just, you don't get homesick during a battle, but you get homesick before and after, I think. I did anyway. Everybody wants to be home with with mama and papa or your family.
Did you have a girlfriend at the time?
Oh, a sailor without a girlfriend? Are you kidding? Oh yeah. Yeah.
Were you able to write home and keep in contact?
Well, we had what they called, the hell did they call that? It was like email is today, but
Email?
V-mail. V is in Victor. They called it V-mail. And you'd write down what you wanted. You'd give it to the officer, whoever was in charge, and they'd put it in a package, and they would, type it out and send it to somewhere else. Then they redid it. How they did that, I don't know. But we could call and we'd do that to tell our folks or friends that we were all right or we weren't, or, that's hard to say. Yeah.
And did you have any good times aboard ship?
Oh yeah, you always have good time. Good time, bad time. Most of the time, pretty good.
Can you talk about one of your more memorable days? One of the happier memories?
Oh, my happiest memory is when I was transferred to Kaneohe Naval Air Station. That was shore duty. I could go ashore every night. In fact, I had a full-time job in Honolulu working in a bakery on my days off.
And that was after you spent time on the Kwajalein?
Yeah, that was after I got off the Kwajalein.
So when you were transferred from the Maryland, what was the reasoning behind that? Was it
Well,
just orders?
they were all these ships. They were getting all these ships. They had to man them, and so they would take a certain amount of people that were like myself, which was at that time I was first class baker. I could teach other people how to bake and run the galley. So that's what I did. My job on the Kwajalein was to teach these guys how to bake and what have you. And then they have to pull people off of ships with experience to try to help out the new guys coming in. They got to be taught. Somebody got to teach them.
Now, had you made some pretty close friends on the Maryland up to that point?
Well, just Reed and Monahan, those two guys, we were kind of buddies. Most people don't get too thick, because you don't know, am I here today and going somewhere else tomorrow?
So did it bother you at all that you'd been transferred, or?
No, I wanted it.
Yeah.
I was glad to get off of it. I had a couple of guys on there we didn't particularly care for. I was glad to get off of it.
And can you talk about your experiences on the Kwajalein?
Well, not much experience on the Kwajalein, except we took some of the Flying Tigers were put aboard our ship with their Corsair fighters, and we took them to Guam and Saipan, and that was fun because I had been around airplanes all my life, and I got to talk to these guys about their experiences in China, and then they were sent down to Guam and Saipan as fighter pilots. It was good. It's pretty good.
Now, had you flown before?
I started flying when I was 13 years old. But I didn't. I and this Monahan and Reed, we took a test to become pilots in the Navy. That was before the war started. And when all three of us says, we don't want nothing to do with airplanes now. Because them guys were they didn't last long. So I never got into that. But after I got out, I flew for for doctors for 20 years, Doctors Without Borders. I was a pilot for one of their outfits for 20 years. I'm an old sucker. In fact, I'm getting older every day.
You and everybody else.
Yeah.
So when did you get transferred off the Kwajalein?
Oh boy, I don't know what year that was. It must have been 45, I think. I was only on there for about 5 or 6 months. And a transfer come in to fly Fleet Air Wing 2, and I knew where Fleet Air Wing 2 was. So I headed for Kaneohe.
Had you put in for a transfer, or they?
No,
Those were
they were
orders?
just a transfer for a first-class Baker. They was gonna. One of the guys worked with me. His name was Ludwig. He was second class. The skipper says, "Well, we'll just take and advance him to a first class and send him." And I said, "No, I'm first class. I got first choice. I'm taking it." So I took it and got off of it. I was glad to get off of it because that thing was those CVEs were coffins because they weren't very thick, very. They were made out of converted transports. Put a deck on them and made them an airplane. We could fire the aircraft off. We couldn't retrieve. We had no retrieving gear at all.
So once they took off, they had to land elsewhere.
They had to land somewhere else. They couldn't land back on that. The only thing you could land, we had a duck. It's a Grumman duck. We had that. It could land because it could fly at about 50 miles an hour. And we had it as our airplane for the ship. That's all we had.
And were there ever any accidents with planes taking off?
No, they all got off all right.
And you guys didn't experience any enemy fire?
Well, yeah. in Guam, the Japanese were still up in the caves on the side of the cliffs. They were shooting at us. I was glad to get out of there in a hurry.
What were they shooting at you with?
I have no idea. Probably
Rifles?
rifle 29s. I think they call them a 29. They were a long ways away.
So where were you when you caught word that the war had ended?
When the war ended, I was in Pearl Harbor, and I had a car there. And I was just driving out of the gate at Pearl Harbor when the Marine there hollered. He says, "It's over with." I said, "What's that?" And he says, "The war is over." And that was at the entrance to Pearl Harbor. Still remember.
So you were in the same place.
I
when
was
it
within.
began as-
I was within 3 miles of when it started, when it ended for me. When the first bomb fell in Pearl Harbor, I was only about 3 miles from there when I got out. When the war ended. Of course, I was still in the Navy. I was in the Navy 2 more years after that. Yeah.
How'd you feel when you heard that the war was over?
Oh, everybody felt happy. We went to Honolulu that night. Everybody in town is celebrating. There were a lot of happy people. See, and most of the people in Honolulu were Japanese. About 85 or 90% of the population were Japanese. And I knew a lot of them. I met a lot of them. They were fine people. They hated the Japanese in Japan as much as we did, or maybe even more, because they were hurting themselves. Yeah.
you spend the next 2 years until you got discharged?
For the next 2 years, I was at Kaneohe Naval Air Station, and then when I decided it was time to get out of there, I got out. My time was up. I could either ship over and stay my whole 20 years or get out. I decided to get out.
And when did you arrive back home? Did you go back home?
Christmas time of 46. 2 days before Christmas, I got home. 46 or 47. Damn, I can't remember. 46 or 47. Let's see. Must have been. No, it's 46. Yeah, I got out December of 46. I actually didn't get out of the service till June of 47. I had that much time after I come back. I could have shipped over up till June of 47.
Did you went and saw your mother?
Pardon?
Did you go to see your mother afterward?
Oh yeah, I went to live at home I lived at home for about, maybe 6 months. And then I moved back to Compton, California.
Was that the first time you had seen her since you had left?
I seen her once during an emergency leave when we were in port. But other than that, that's the only time I seen her.
How did it feel to be reunited with her again?
Oh, fine. We were very close. My mother was an Annie Oakley with a gun. She loved to hunt. She had registered in her little diary that she had killed 106 bucks in her lifetime. She was quite a Annie Oakley with a gun.
Sharpshooter.
Right. She was good.
So how did you spend the next few years after returning from the war?
Well, I went to work for Standard Oil Company, Standard Stations in Long Beach. I worked for them. Well, when I first got out, I went back. I had a job for about 4 or 5 months before got out of the service. I went to work for Weyerhaeuser's, and I worked for them for about 4 or 5 months. Then I quit there and went. But my uncle said he had me a job in Long Beach, working for Standard Stations. So I went back to Standard Oil Company, and I worked there for about 3 or 4 years. And then after that, I opened up 2 or 3 service stations. I had another fella. And then after that, I bought a garage, and I went in the auto air conditioning business. I was one of the first people to get in the auto air conditioning business in Los Angeles. And I did that for the best part of 40 years. I went from 1948 until 1983. I retired in 83.
Tell me a little bit more about your flying career.
Well, I've got 7,000 hours of flying, and I used to do a lot of flying for friends. I deliver airplanes for friends of mine at Torrance Airport in Torrance, and then I just did a lot of flying. We had a place my wife and I, we had a place in Mexico, and we had a place in Havasu, and on the weekends we'd go to Havasu to go water skiing, and then about once or twice a month we'd go to Mexico fishing. And then when I retired, I went to work. I didn't work. It was just I owned the airplane. I owned a couple of airplanes, and one friend of mine said, "Would you mind flying for some doctors?" And so I started flying for Doctors Without Borders. That was fun.
Where'd you guys fly to?
We didn't get paid for it.
Right.
We were doing that as free The only thing they had to do is pay for the expenses on fuel and repair and what have you on the airplane.
And where would you guys fly to?
All over Mexico, mostly in Baja, but a lot of times on Obregon and Los Mochis and places in Mexico. They put up some pretty good sized triage centers to take care of Mexicans and Indians. This one place we went was a place called Bakun. It was Yaqui Indians. They're quite a bunch of people. In fact, the gal that takes and does my housework here at the house, she's a Yaqui Indian. They're nice people.
Do you still fly today?
Well, not very much, but I flew about 3 weeks ago. A friend of mine who was a lieutenant on the police force in Riverside, every year on my birthday he usually comes over and takes me flying, and I fly his airplane. We flew together for the doctors, and so I'm at the airport. I go to the airport every morning for breakfast, and everybody out there is pilots. I used to own a hangar out here at Emmett, and I sold that about 10, 12 years ago when I sold my airplanes. But I still like to fly. I've got a commercial license and an instrument license, so I'm a commercial pilot.
Said almost 7,000 hours, huh?
Yeah, a little over 7,000. That's a lot of time.
It's almost an entire year.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. But it's fun.
What's your favorite aircraft to fly?
Bonanza. Bonanzas are, that's my favorite. Bonanzas and 210. I like the Baron. A friend of mine had a Baron. I used to fly with him all the time. He got killed in Mexico, though.
Flying?
Yeah, the Mexican put the wrong fuel in his airplane. It killed him and his wife and his foreman. He owned the largest produce outfit in Los Angeles. Good friend, the best Japanese. His name was Tanemura. The best friend I ever had. We were friends for probably 25 years before he got killed. We had a camp down in Mexico, about 700 miles down there. We owned everything in the camp, he and I did. It belonged to a gal named Irene, but we owned everything in the camp. Generators, boats, motors, and I never went back. I sent her a letter, said everything in the camp is yours. I'm not coming back. I couldn't handle it. I really liked the guy. He was a good friend.
And one question that I forgot to ask you in regards to the attack at Pearl Harbor, had you guys shot down any planes?
Well, we got credit for one, but I don't know if we did or not.
One question I'd like to ask you is if you had any advice for future generations, my generation, anything that you could offer, what would that be?
Not really. I don't know. Not really. The only one thing I wish they'd have never stopped the draft. I think we'd have a lot more fine men if we'd some of them would be in the service for a little while, straighten up their thinking. Because we got a lot of, I won't go into that.